Is tipping culture out of control? Is there a war on tips? Articles spewing hate about tipping culture are everywhere. They're not just in my news feeds. They're not just in yours. They're seeping through every pore of the internet. What's going on, everybody? I'm Zach Drives Fast for the RideShare Guy. And in this video, we're going to talk about tipping culture in the United States and what it means for us as drivers. Make sure to stick around to the end of the video because I'm going to teach you how to counter common arguments that I hear from customers who just don't want to tip their driver. You know the old adage, the trend is your friend? Well, this time the trend is working against us. Articles normalizing the idea of exploiting otherwise underpaid workers are everywhere. And admittedly, there are aspects of tipping culture that I don't wish to take part in either. For example, over this last week, I stayed at a fairly nice hotel in downtown Portland, and upon arriving, I realized that they didn't have their own parking lot. Rather than sucking it up and just tipping the valet, I opted to navigate a city I didn't know well into the evening to find my own parking. And I ended up hiking blocks back to the hotel with luggage. All of this will be relevant in a moment, I promise. After driving for hours, getting stuck in traffic for hours, and arriving with a back so sore that I could barely move, you'd think I'd suck it up and just tip them. So why didn't I? Just like customers on food delivery apps, I was already spending a lot of money to be there, and the idea of spending more money just didn't sound appealing to me. Since I wasn't prepared to tip the valet, I didn't feel entitled to use the service. And that's where the problem with food delivery apps lies. I realized that a valet is a luxury service and one that I could perform for myself. The problem begins when customers feel entitled to use a luxury service without tipping the person who is performing said service for them. According to this article, 2/3 of Americans are experiencing tip fatigue. So why is that? Americans are seeing more tipping prompts than they have in previous years. This includes, but is not limited to, auto repair shops and department stores. On top of that, many restaurants are now asking customers to tip up front when calling in to-go orders. I've personally witnessed this twice in the last couple of months. All right, example time. I know it may come as a huge shock to some of you, but I don't always eat the healthiest foods. I love Girl Scout cookies, specifically Thin Mints and Samoas. As we all know, Girl Scouts hoard them and they're only available certain times of the year. So when I see a Scout selling them, I have to buy a few boxes. However, I know that after I see that first troop selling those delicious bits of happiness, that it's just a matter of time before there's a troop at every entrance to every store in the city asking me to drop more money. It's nothing personal, but it does get old having to say no thank you over and over and over. In my opinion, this is what Americans are feeling when it comes to tipping. In the interest of not boring you to death, I'm going to keep this next part pretty brief. Tipping began in Europe as a way for the elite class to reward their servants for going above and beyond. Americans visiting Europe eventually brought this practice back to the States because they wanted to seem aristocratic and bougie as shit. Now that you're practically a history professor, we can continue. This practice was continued by employers who did not want to pay their staff a living wage, so the practice of tipping continued. Fast forward a couple hundred years, and not much has changed. There's still no flying cars, and people still tip. One of the most common arguments that I hear is that tipping doesn't exist in a huge portion of the world. Let's pick on Norway specifically. If you tried to leave a tip in Norway, at the very least, it would be viewed as odd, and potentially even disrespectful. Doing so could be viewed as you seeing that person as impoverished. Sounds great. We can go out for a wonderful dinner, experience good service, and not have to worry about tipping after. But there's a flip side to that. In countries where tipping is not the standard, employees are typically paid substantially more than they would be for the same job if they were in the States. They're paid a living wage. If you wanted to go and work a fast food job in Norway, you'd earn at least $20 an hour. However, if you wanted to eat there, you would also spend twice as much as you would in the States. It's a trade-off. Sure, you're not tipping, but you are paying way more for products and services than you would here in the States. Let me know in the comments if you would rather spend a little more without the expectation of tipping or pay less with the expectation of tipping. Furthermore, which system do you feel is more beneficial for the worker? Let's not forget, this is a tipping society, and it's the worker who gets caught in the middle of the tipping debate. As a content creator, it's not just drivers that stumble upon my videos. From time to time, it's entitled, opinionated customers who try to voice their viewpoints on why they feel that my time isn't worth a tip. Perhaps a customer who feels that strongly that tipping shouldn't exist shouldn't utilize a service where tipping is expected. That way, they can show that they don't like tipping without exploiting anybody. By them not giving their business to companies who rely on their employees being paid partially in the form of tips, it sends a pretty strong message. Pay your workers a fair wage. But no, as we are all too familiar with, some customers feel like they're entitled to our time without tipping us for it. Food delivery, rideshare, and shopping for somebody is not a human right. It's a luxury service that saves them time. We're going to get into common arguments that I hear and how to counter them shortly, but first, we're going to talk about why I feel it is perfectly reasonable to tip a driver up front. We're not servers in a restaurant. They're not analyzing our every move to determine how much of a tip that we deserve. The service is that they get to sit on their couch while we drive to the restaurant, pick up their order, navigate traffic, and then drop their order off at their front door. That is the service. One of the most common arguments I hear is you tip after the service. And sure, in a restaurant that's true, but we're less hospitality and more logistics. Our job is to get something from point A to point B, and that job also requires that we use our own vehicles, our own gas, and our own time without an hourly rate. Frankly, I think that the word tip hurts drivers. It sends the wrong message. It should be called a bid for service. Let me know in the comments if you agree with me. Furthermore, the money that the customer is spending is really paying for three things: the product itself, the booking fee, and the driver. You wouldn't expect to use a car without having to pay for gas or insurance, would you? As nice as it would be to just pay my car payment and have it run on nothing more than hopes and dreams, I still have to put gas in it and pay for insurance. Unlike servers at a restaurant, we're out of pocket to perform our job duties, and all without an hourly rate. Now that we've determined that we are nothing like servers in a restaurant and that we eat our own expenses, yeah, I don't really feel like it's unrealistic to ask the customer to tip the driver up front. All right, let's get into common arguments and how to counter them. I feel like this should go without saying, but never discuss tips with your customers. That is a surefire way to get deactivated. Use what I'm about to teach you on Facebook groups, YouTube comments, Reddit, neighborhood.com, whatever. Just not with your customers. If you're doing it right, you shouldn't have these kind of customers to begin with. Common argument number 1. I tip after the service. No, they don't. I've done that experiment. In the overwhelming majority of cases, if they didn't tip in the app up front, they definitely aren't going to tip you in person. The customers who are going to tip you in person also tipped you in the app to begin with. This is why almost every no-tip order is a leave it at the door and not a hand it to me. I'd like to point out that customers have to go out of their way not to tip you in the app, so the idea that they're going to tip you in person is likely a fallacy. Common argument number 2. It's your company's responsibility to pay you fairly, not mine. I don't necessarily disagree with that, but like we talked about earlier, we're the ones in the middle. Not only will the companies not pay us more, they continue to pay us less. The way I see it, in this country, you pay for a service. So their options are to have it delivered and leave a tip, or to be cheap and go get it themselves. By using the service and not tipping the driver, they're exploiting us. Do not be the person who enables that kind of behavior. If they believe that strongly that tipping shouldn't exist and we should be paid fairly, then they shouldn't be doing business with a company who relies on us being paid in tips, a company who goes against their moral compass. Common argument number 3. I'm not going to tip you because the last 3 drivers did blah, 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 blah. Yeah, and a small handful of pilots have also crashed airplanes, but 99.99999% of them haven't, and we both know they're not about to catch a Greyhound versus fly for their next vacation. I'm going to be straight up. This argument spews an entitlement mentality. Blaming you for something that somebody else allegedly did is unreasonable and is nothing more than an excuse. A few weeks ago, I went to the store and bought a loaf of bread, and when I got it home, I realized it was a little moldy. It doesn't mean I'm going to boycott freaking bread. People who use this argument were not going to tip to begin with, and they're just grasping at straws trying to justify screwing us over. These are also the people who will claim that the order never arrived after asking you for a ton of extras. They're doing you a favor by not tipping, because when their order comes through, you can look at it, laugh, and then let it time out. When you have somebody dumb enough to tell you that they don't tip because of other people's actions, ask them if they boycott flying, because when that goes wrong, it's a hell of a lot worse than just having to get something refunded. Common argument number 4. I can't afford to tip. In that case, they can't afford to and shouldn't use the service. You're not going to go to a hotel and expect to pay just to use the pool, are you? Customers who use this argument will frequently follow it up with some kind of a sob story, like they don't have a car, or their freaking cat died 3 years ago, or some other bullshit. Not to sound harsh, but that's a them problem, not an us problem. They can take those Escalades and those Lamborghinis and hike their happy non-tipping asses to the store and buy groceries that aren't marked up by an app. Their problems do not justify us taking a loss to deliver to ungrateful, entitled customers. Alright guys, this is a bonus one and I'm going a little off script with it. Another common thing that I hear is to get a real job, one that doesn't rely on tips. No. I'm not going to change my line of work because some random dickhead on the internet doesn't feel like my line of work is a real job. A real job is something that pays the bills. It's not my fault that they hate their boss and that they have to get permission to take a day off when I don't have to. People can get really ignorant when the subject of tipping comes up, but hopefully I've armed you with some good responses. Alright guys, that is going to about wrap up this video. If you haven't done so yet, please do consider pressing the like button and subscribing to the RideShare Guy. You can find my videos here every Tuesday. If you enjoyed this video, you may also enjoy this video where I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly with robots delivering food. I'm Zach Drives Fast for the RideShare Guy. Take care.